would like to talk with you about cybersecurity, a very timely topic. Hardly any week passes without yet another attack, yet another 50 million credit card numbers stolen, yet another hack against a hospital. I'm a cybersecurity researcher, and a large part what we do as a scientific community, we try to figure out what will be the new, what will be the future, what will be the unexpected attacks in our cyber world. Cybersecurity is somehow linked to computers, right? So why don't we have a look at the evolution of computer technology? If you go back maybe 50 years or so, people that are even older than I, you remember, maybe vaguely remember this time of computer mainframes. What was that? Well, this is essentially one computer, and it's surrounded by humans, so many humans interact with only one computer. People in my age group, we remember very well the 1980s, 1990s, that was the age of personal computers, right? There was one user and one computer, right? Our laptop, our PC, that was our gate to the internet, right? Our IT world was represented by this one computer. More recently, over the last maybe 10 years or so, the evolution has taken us to the brave new world of the Internet of Things. What is that? Well, you have one user in the middle, but then we're surrounded by many, many computing devices. They're not computers anymore. There's things such as smart refrigerators, smart watches, cars are equipped with a lot of computers, this kind of stuff, right? So the next thing we want to look at is how has this really evolved? What are the numbers here, right? So if you go back not that far, only 15 years about, right? We had about 7.5 billion people on planet Earth, and there were very few, relatively speaking, Internet of Things devices, it's small, smart devices, right? That means about 12 humans shared one of these computing devices, right? There were very, very few. Fast forward today, what do we have? The number of people on planet Earth hasn't changed that much, 7.6 billion people, but suddenly we have 50 billion interconnected devices. It means per human, and that counts everybody, also people in the developing world, we already have per human 7 interconnected devices. Where are all these devices? Well, everybody knows, the smart home is coming up. Cars is totally estimated normally. High-end cars have up to 80 small computers on board, right? They don't look like laptops, but they're built in, right? And we're going to see more and more. What we are interested in as cybersecurity researcher, what are the threats? What are the new threats that come with cybersecurity here, right? And in particular, what we are interested in, are there threats in the brave new world of the Internet of Things that are different from the traditional Internet? Are there new threats that are totally different, whether we have a laptop or whether we have some kind of small device? And let's look at 2 case studies, right? First, we look at medical implants. What you see here is a defibrillator that's similar to a pacemaker. They're very valuable, really helpful for healthcare. And not surprisingly, these devices have become smart over the last years or so. Meaning smart being there's a small computer built in. Computers run on software, and what you can do, not surprisingly, you can do software updates, and you have to do software updates. Now the question arises, and first of all, it seems like a technical question, how do we do software updates? Well, I can tell you one way not to do it. You don't want to have an open heart surgery every time you want to add new software to that device, right? And again, not surprisingly, what the manufacturers came up with is over-the-air update, with a wireless interface similar to what you have on your smartphone or so, right? So is that dangerous? It can be dangerous. What can happen if you put a software update on this device, but it's a malicious update, right? So there's a computer virus in the software running. What can happen? People can die. How is that? Well, defibrillators have the ability to issue high voltage peaks, which make your heart stop and you literally die, right? And some of you might remember Dick Cheney, the former vice president of the United States. He got one of these devices implanted, and he had asked his surgeon to disable this over-the-air software update because he was actually afraid of being assassinated by software updates, right? That's a good story. Okay, let's look at another case study, right? Maybe closer to home. This is cars. Cars are great. I love driving our small Toyota. And they're very useful. They're also very dangerous. In Europe, about 20,000 people die per year on the road. In the US, about 30,000 people die on the road every year. It's very, very dangerous. And actually, in the age group over 25, under 25, which is true for most people in this room, car accidents are the #1 cause of death, right? More than suicide, more than drug abuse, more than disease, right? So cars can be very, very dangerous. The question is, how do we deal with that? Well, the big industrial nations have come up with standards, and within the next 2 or 3 years, all cars that leave the conveyor belt will be able to talk to each other, right? And this is what's sometimes referred to as car-to-car communication, right? Is this a good thing? Probably, right? The estimates are maybe a little bit optimistic, but they're still very impressive. So the estimates say that we will reduce the number of deadly car accidents by 80%. That means tens of thousands of lives saved per year due to this new technology. It's essentially every car will be equipped with a Wi-Fi type of technology. Is this without risks? No, it comes with risks. Once cars start to talk to each other, you can also start influencing cars, right? And what can happen? Car accidents due to hackers. Is it unrealistic? I don't think so. I mean, just imagine a very simple scenario. Go on a German Autobahn, 180 kilometers per hour, and your car is being hacked, and the hacker decides to activate a brake, but selectively. Let's say only the front wheel. If you go with 180 in a German Autobahn and suddenly your front left wheel brakes, this will most likely cause a very, very bad accident. So you see there are a lot of risks going on, and what we do as a cybersecurity community, we also try to look at new risks. What are the future unexpected attacks, right? So we try to be the bad guy, so to speak, right? And one particular dangerous attack that we see, where we put a lot of work in, are hardware trojans. What are hardware trojans? You take any electronic device, that can be a pacemaker, that can be a car, it can be a smartphone, right? So let's look at a smartphone. If you open up a smartphone, what you see, a printed circuit board, what's called a motherboard in laptops, and you see a lot of these integrated circuits, right? Electronic devices, and they drive the digital revolution. If you open up one of these integrated circuits, you see this. What is that? This is hundreds of millions of transistors, and you don't have to understand any details here, right? Just remember the many, many transistors on there. What's a hardware Trojan? Well, similar to a software Trojan, you start adding some unwanted functionality to your digital hardware, right? To the chip, to the integrated circuits that runs your smartphone. One question we might want to ask ourselves, why? Why would anybody interested in doing this weird thing? Well, there are a whole bunch of rather unpleasant applications. I put quotation marks in that because that's application from a bad guy point of view, right? You're a national intelligence service. One standard example in our community is, let's say you go to eBay and order a military drone. I'm kidding, you cannot order military drone on eBay, but if you're general, you can do that, right? So let's say you get your military drone and the drone works perfectly well, unless it's flying over Germany, over China, over Luxembourg, pick your country. Why would that be? Well, because somebody injected one of these hardware Trojans in this integrated circuit that does, for instance, the GPS coordinates, right? And if the GPS coordinates say Germany, the drone stops working. It's very unpleasant if you're in the business of running military drones, right? Maybe closer to home, a more European perspective on that is our power grid. The power grid has become the smart grid, meaning it's also run, it's controlled by digital electronics. And again, what can happen here is that the hardware Trojans in the digital chips that run our power supply, and it would be extremely unfortunate, extremely unpleasant, for instance, if a foreign nation takes over our power grid. The same thing you can do with smartphones. It's probably not that far-fetched that there would be people that are really interested in taking over smartphones, right? You could read a lot of security-sensitive stuff, right? Can read our email, can violate our privacy. So the problem with hardware Trojans is we have not observed one, we as a scientific community. This is in stark contrast to software Trojans, right? Software viruses, software Trojans, we get a few 10,000s per day. In the hardware case, we're down to 0, right? And that's kind of where our research started. So we're asking ourselves, what would we do when we build a hardware Trojan? And what we try to do is to build not only a hardware Trojan, but to build one that's specifically sneaky, that's incredibly hard to detect, very, very stealthy, right? So let's look at any of these integrated circuits. Again, these chips run your smartphone, they run your car, they run your smartwatch, right? So if you look deeper into them, you see this thing which is called TRNG, which is a terrible abbreviation that stands for True Random Number Generator, which is a terrible name too, right? It's something rather simple. It's True Random Number Generator. It's a digital coin flip. So this little piece of circuit generates random zeros and ones. What do you need random numbers for? Well, in particular, for cryptographic keys. Why do you need crypto keys on the smartphone? For all, or the laptop, for all the stuff that's security relevant, right? E-banking secure, web browsing secure, emails, document certification. With other words, this is exactly the stuff the bad guys, the hacker, would like to have access to, right? They want to do e-banking in your name, right? So what we came up with is, with the idea, let's insert the Trojan not in the general computer, but just in this tiny, tiny circuit that does this digital coin flipping, right? That generates random zeros and ones. So how do we do that? You know, you take your smartphone. Again, you don't have to take a smartphone. You can do that also with your pacemaker, right? Any digital smart device, IoT device, right? You find the integrated circuit, and now you identify this true random number generator, which is not that hard. And what you see up there, this is one transistor. And this is not to scale. Transistors are not 4 meters long, right? They're rather 100 nanometers, which is 1,000th of a human hair. So the whole thing is tiny, 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 tiny. So what we now propose, what bad people could do, and that's really dangerous, you inject the Trojan at this point, right? What you see here, the blue and the yellow, this is silicon, right, as in Silicon Valley. So what you do, you literally fiddle around with the atoms. So you add different atoms to that in a way that the transistor stops working, which is not that hard. So you add a few atoms which are not silicon, which makes the transistor stop working. What's going to happen if you do that? If everything works correctly without the Trojan, the way our smartphone or laptop is supposed to work, you have 2 to the 56 cryptographic keys. This is a large number. This is an astronomically large number. This is a gigantic number. If people want to try to break that, even the NSA, right, with huge computer resources, this is going to take the lifetime of the universe. This is not going to happen. You cannot search this number of keys. But, and now it's getting interesting, with the Trojan on board, you can generate only 2 to the 32 cryptographic keys. Is that a large number? It depends. 2 to 32 is 1 billion, so you get 1 billion keys, which is great. It means you as a user, you get still 1 million secure internet connections and always using a different cryptographic keys. But the bad guys who injected this Trojan know exactly this 1 billion keys, and searching through 1 billion keys takes about 2 seconds on a laptop nowadays, right? So this is a brilliant attack, against brilliant from an attacker's point of view, right? Because suddenly we call that we reduce the key space. You can search through all possible keys in 2 seconds, but as a user, you would never know. And by the way, finding this Trojan is extremely hard. Again, we only fiddle around on the atomic level. So in summary now, the attacker can break all secure internet connections, even though the manipulation, we didn't manipulate the software, we didn't touch any of that, we just fiddled around down, you know, inside the silicon, so to speak. And again, it's virtually impossible to detect. So now I'm coming to the end of my talk, and one question you may want to ask yourself, why in the world is Christof doing that? Why do scientists build hardware Trojans, right? The short answer is we want to make the internet more secure. We want to definitely also make the Internet of Things more secure because this is a huge new risk potential, right? We saw that with cars and medical implants. How do we do that? In a nutshell, we have to take the role of the bad guy. That means we have to look for new unexpected type of attacks, unexpected type of vulnerabilities in our digital hardware. And then the important part comes afterwards, namely once we know, okay, hardware Trojans, this is a new, what we call an attack vector, then the research really starts and we try to find ways of preventing that. And that's actually one very, very important aspect of my group and a lot of other researchers internationally. That's the end of my talk. Thank you very much.